Daqin, I summon the dead in the Fushu Society. Introduction. A stone tablet grows from the ground and reads, when the ancestor dragon dies, the world is divided. The remaining sins of the 6 kingdoms, which little cutie did this. With the death of the ancestral dragon, no one in the north can suppress the Fushu generals, and they will lead millions of undead spirits into the central plains. If Fushu comes, although the world is large, there will be no way for them to survive. 100 schools of thought, this is a conspiracy. When the ancestral dragon dies, Fusu will lead millions of undead spirits from the north into the central plains. At that time, it will not be the division of the world, it will be the downfall of the world, it will be the downfall of 100 families. Confucianism, that is an absolute temper, otherwise the Xiongnu in the north would not have demanded to be incorporated into the Great Qin. The Zhu tribe migrated to seek protection, and the Baiyue in the south would not have incorporated their territory into the Great Qin. Fusu, then let's see if I destroyed your country first, or if you ran to the Great Qin to claim allegiance and conquer the land. Fusu, father, even the Xiongnu are gone. Why are you still repairing the Great Wall? It's time-consuming and laborious. Zulong, who can I defend against while repairing the Great Wall? Don't you have any points in your mind? This is a Great Qin where countless people hope for the longevity of the ancestral dragon. Because in the north of the Great Qin dynasty, there are countless undead spirits outside the Great Wall, and their owners are Fushu. Chapter 1, Wearing Fusu and Running Away at the Beginning. You are listening at Novel Full.audio. Is this the world of the dead? Am I going to heaven now? As an Easterner, I actually went to heaven in the east. In the white space, Fusu turned his head and looked around at a vast expanse of white, his face full of confusion and astonishment. A spiritual light suddenly flashed through Fushu's mind. Yao Shou. The underworld has been captured by heaven, reincarnation is gone. The blue star will be gone. The next second, Fushu's face was full of fear and he turned pale in shock. Ding, stop directing and acting for the host, get up and run away quickly. Cut. At night in the Zilin Palace, Fushu Yuyu woke up with a helpless sigh. Now it is 230 BC, and Zulong is 29 years old. I have crossed into the 12-year-old Fusu, relying on my modern thinking and knowledge, as well as the spoilers of history, the Golden Finger system, and being the eldest son of Zulong. It is hard to say that I can still make great military achievements on the battlefield to lay the foundation for the future. I have safely won at the starting line. But we're not lucky, the bound Golden Finger is actually an undead system. At the beginning, he was transformed into a witch by the system. His image was like a zombie, with blue soul flames burning in his eyes and his voice starting to sound hoarse. Isn't that noisy? With his current secure and ghostly appearance, he was found to be pulled out and burned in minutes. After burning, he had to grind all the bones into powder. Even when Zulong came, he couldn't stop him. Oh, no, Zulong will definitely not stop, he will still be the first to take the lead. Maybe before he burns himself to death, Zulong will have someone torture him severely, this demon ghost, and what happened to Fushu. By the way, I would like to attribute the reason for the defeat and heavy casualties in the battle against Zhao last year to myself, this demon. As for making Zulong believe that he is Fusu, what are you joking about? It's true that Zulong, the eternal emperor, was blown up, but it was killed. Especially now in 230 BC, Qin has sharpened his sword and prepared to annihilate Han, officially beginning the main line of unifying the world. At this moment, I have become such a ghost. Even if Zulong believes that I am Fusu or the eldest son of Zulong, he must order me to be burned to ensure the safety of the world, so that no one can say that the country will produce demons and the world will perish. If such remarks were made, it would definitely have a great impact on the hearts and minds of the people and the military, affecting the direction of the war. Not burning one's own ancestral dragon would be a pity for many of the remaining martyrs of the sixth king. The pit forcing system, my rocket started. Thinking so, Fushu couldn't help but curse and hurriedly packed up his things. Run away, you have to run quickly. If you don't run properly, you will die tragically. Fortunately, I have memories of Fusu and know where I need what I need, as well as a direction to escape. After some fumbling and tidying up, Fusu put on all his clothes, tore off the sheets, tore them into strips of cloth, and wrapped his head around them. He only showed his eyes, and then found a hood to cover himself even more tightly, even wrapping his hands with strips of cloth. Subsequently, Fusu carried a bag of cloth, his sword, personal jade pendant, and token, and was about to leave. As he approached the door, Fusu hesitated for a second and came back to find a piece of silk cloth and a brush. He hastily wrote a few paragraphs and placed them by the bed before leaving the room. He didn't forget to close the door again. What kind of person? As soon as he left the room, the guards on duty in the Xilin Palace immediately discovered the suspiciously dressed Fusu and asked. "Shut up. I cannot mention my departure to anyone. Go and report to Father Wang in secret. Please come personally, and no one is allowed to enter the house before this. Otherwise, there will be no mercy. I have a secret message inside the house, and only Father Wang can observe it." Fusu lowered his head and said, trying his best to make a non-hoarse voice, taking out his own token. Seeing that Fusu was originally Su, and Fusu, who was usually well versed in Confucianism and polite, used such a stern tone at this time, the guards immediately dared not say much and had to let Fusu leave. Looking at the departing Fusu, the guard commander on duty had a serious gaze and immediately ordered a guard, "You go report quickly." As soon as he left the Xilin Palace, Fushu met a patrol of guards. "Stop, who is that?" These guards saw how suspicious Fusu's attire was, and immediately shouted and aimed their weapons at him. In the distance, another patrol guard heard the sound and immediately rushed towards this side. "Follow the Grand Prince's secret order to handle matters. Quickly dodge," Fusu said hoarsely and took out the token again. Upon seeing this, the captain of the guard immediately stepped forward to take the token, carefully examined it, and waved his hand, urging the guards to quickly retreat to both sides to make way. The other team of guards, upon seeing the situation, quickly stopped and retreated to both sides. What person? In front of the inner palace gate, the guards saw the suspiciously dressed Fusu rushing towards them and immediately let out a loud shout. A dozen or so people immediately surrounded Fusu with weapons, indicating that they were about to take it if they were not clear about it. According to the secret order of the Grand Prince, open the door quickly. Fusu lowered his head and took out his token again. Upon hearing this, the commander of the guard quickly ran to Fusu and respectfully took the token. After carefully examining it, he waved his hand and shouted, "Open the door." After leaving the inner palace gate, Fusu hurriedly walked outside the palace and encountered more than 10 patrol guards along the way. He passed through 7 palace gates before leaving the palace. It's also good if you're going out of the palace instead of meeting the king of Qin, otherwise you'll just be dressed up like this. It's useless if you have a token. Upon arriving outside the palace, Fusu immediately found a corner that the guards couldn't see, muttering a spell to summon the undead. Grey gas began to seep out from underground, and a dead horse crawled out through the soil. Fusu took out a prepared cloth curtain to cover the eyes of the corpse horse burning with the fire of its soul, then flipped over and mounted the horse, immediately galloping wildly. Stop! Not long after galloping on horseback, Fusu encountered a group of soldiers patrolling at night blocking the way. From a distance, Fusu narrowed his eyes and tried not to expose the blue flames in his eyes. Nowadays, there is a curfew in Xianyang, and anyone who dares to travel at night must be investigated by patrol soldiers. If it is not a life-threatening matter, they will be severely punished. I have received a secret order from the Grand Prince to go out of Xianyang to handle affairs. Fusu Loma stopped, took out the token, closed his eyes, and said. Sitting on the horse now, if you don't close your eyes, you can't hide your burning eyes. Upon seeing the token, the patrol soldier Shi Chang immediately dared not stop him and retreated to both sides with the blocking patrol soldiers. Drive. Squinting his eyes, he quietly looked at the situation. After seeing the patrol soldiers make way, Fusu immediately rode his horse again and ran a distance before fully opening his eyes to see the way. Finally, it's out. After leaving the gate of Xianyang City, Fusu finally breathed a sigh of relief. If I were to be discovered in the city, I would be like a turtle in a jar, and I could only summon the undead to kill them. This is not the result I want. Now that I'm out of the city, with a corpse horse that won't feel tired under my crotch, even if Zulong sends someone to chase after me, I can't even catch myself. I can't even eat the ashes. Next, as long as we keep heading north, wait until we leave Itsu, cross the Hetao grassland, and continue to develop for 3 to 5 years, no one can threaten us anymore. Chapter 2, The Child Goes to be the Lich King. You are listening at Novel Full.audio. At night in the Zilin Palace, Zulong, who was only 29 years old, looked at the silk book in his hand. His face was pitch black, his body trembled, his fists clenched, and his teeth clenched. I saw on the silk in my hand. Dear Father. My child has a dream tonight. When I was born, the wind in the Yinshan Mountains softly called out my name, Fushu. Therefore, my child went north of Hetao to become the Lich King. Father, there is no need to worry. Father, I am proud to see you gradually unify the world and become the embodiment of justice. Remember, we have always ruled this country with wisdom and strength, and I believe you will cautiously lead this country toward strength, prosperity, and brightness. You must remember that true victory is to inspire the fighting spirit in the hearts of your people. One day, you will be able to unify the world, become the eternal emperor who unified the Central Plains, and make all the people of the world a family without any disputes. As for the places outside the Central Plains, Father, don't think about them. They belong to the children of Fushu, so don't worry about Father. The Lich King, respected Fusu. At this moment, Zulong wanted to hit the baby, the kind he would hit to death, the kind he would kill. But he still managed to hold back his anger because there was more to come. In addition, Fusu learned that there were 2 crops in the north, west, and then south of Hetao, called baogu and potato, with a yield of up to 20 to 30 stones. Obtaining them could strengthen the country and benefit the people, and alleviate the hunger and suffering of the people all over the world. Therefore, the child suddenly felt that the world was vast and wanted to go and see it, so that they could find such excellent crops for the great Qin. However, the journey is arduous, with high mountains and ice fields widely spread. The war is yet to be decided, and the matter is of great importance. I dare not leak any information, so my father does not need to send people to search for it. Anyway, it cannot be found. Dear child, respected Fusu. Bastard. Rebels. Rebels. After reading it all, Zulong couldn't help but feel the anger in his heart. He roared, and all the anger he had endured in 29 years of life was not as intense as this time. This is his legitimate eldest son. Upon seeing this, Zhao Gao, who had followed him, almost buried his head in his chest, afraid of being provoked by the enraged king of Qin. Zhao Gao, immediately make noise. Come and see me. No, it's all noise. Princess, come and see me. Zulong suppressed his anger and commanded Zhao Gao beside him. He really wanted to beat up Fusu now, but Fusu had already run away. To prevent such a situation from happening again, he felt it was necessary to teach other young masters and princesses a serious lesson. To prevent being beaten to death, he simply called all his children over. If Zhao Gao heard this and felt relieved, quickly taking small steps outside. At this moment, he dared not stay any longer in front of the king of Qin. Wait. However, just as Zhao Gao also crossed the threshold, Zulong stopped him again. Upon hearing the sound, Zhao Gao stumbled and almost fell, trembling with fear. Zulong's low and composed voice was heard as he said, immediately make a fuss about Meng Tian. Meng Yi will secretly go to Zhangtai Palace to see me. You can go in person. Today's matter must not be known to anyone, go quickly. Also, let people call those young masters and princesses to Zhangtai Palace. If. Zhao Gao responded with a if sound and immediately ran away as if fleeing. After Zhao Gao left, Zulong clenched his fist and looked at the silk book in his hand, his eyes shining brightly. This silk book has made him a timeless joke. As for what was said in the letter, he doesn't believe it at all. Fusu is only 12 years old, and Xianyang has not been out a few times. The news he received from nowhere is simply playful. When they catch him, he will definitely beat him up first, no, beat him up 3 times first. The world is still vast, if you want to go and see it, then let someone lock this rebellious son in a prisoner's car and parade the streets to show him how big Xianyang is first. If you still want to be a Lich King, then give him the title of Dirty Demon King again and let him clean up the toilets up and down in Xianyang. In the darkness, Meng Tian and Meng Yi hurriedly entered Xianyang Palace and rushed towards Zhangtai Palace. At this moment, the two of them were also anxious. They learned from Zhao Gao that at midnight tonight, the guards of Xilin Palace hurriedly reported that the eldest son, Fusu, had secretly left the palace and was nowhere to be found. And there is a silk book left, which can only be observed by His Majesty. Your Majesty went to the Xilin Palace, and after reading the silk book, he was extremely angry. He loudly spread the word to all the young masters and princesses, and secretly ordered the two of them to go to the Zhangtai Palace. All these things immediately made the two of them speculate that perhaps Fusu had done something big and run away. Your Majesty is asking them to chase after Fusu and bring him back. As for what major event could make your Majesty so angry, the two of them had no way of guessing. As for the other young masters and princesses, they may have suffered a reckless disaster. With a nervous heart, the two quickly arrived at Zhangtai Palace. As soon as they arrived here, their pupils shrank and they were greatly shocked. At this moment, a group of trembling young masters and princesses were kneeling outside the Zhangtai Palace, and several young masters and princesses were frightened and began to cry. A group of palace maids knelt on the ground, trembling and trembling. Second young Master Gao and third young Master Yu have swollen noses and faces, while His Majesty is currently beating fourth young Master Jiang Lu. Meng Tian and Meng Yi hesitated for a moment. It is obvious that this young master has made His Majesty very angry. Big brother, you are a warrior, you are durable. Meng Yi pushed Meng Tian. Meng Tian gritted his teeth and quickly stepped forward, reporting, I, Meng Tian, Meng Yi, see your Majesty. Upon seeing the arrival of Meng Tian and Meng Yi, Zulong stopped and said to the young masters and princesses, kneel down in the corner. The young masters and princesses suddenly breathed a sigh of relief, and Yu reading www.yuukangshu.net quickly knelt down on the palace wall, not daring to look back. Zulong looked at Meng Tian and Meng Yi kneeling in front of him and gritted his teeth, saying, Meng Tian, Meng Yi, you two should immediately receive 300. No, lead 3,000 soldiers and horses to catch Fusu for me. You must see people alive, you must see corpses dead. I take orders. Meng Tian and Meng Yi immediately responded loudly, as they hurriedly left to mobilize troops. Big brother, what exactly did the young master do to make your Majesty so angry? After leaving the palace, Meng Yi curiously asked Meng Tian. I don't know, I don't want to know either. If you want to know, why don't you ask your Majesty? Upon hearing this, Meng Tian immediately rolled his eyes. Is this what they can inquire about? Meng Yi. Judging from your Majesty's angry expression, how dare he ask? Meng Tian slapped Meng Yi on the back of his head and said angrily, I'm curious if I know I can't ask. How many heads do you have? We'll just follow orders tonight and ignore everything else. We won't ask or listen to anyone. On the other side, after leaving Xianyang, Fusu kept galloping towards the north on horseback. The corpse horse under this crotch is incomparable to ordinary horses. Not only does it not tire or require food, drink, or litter, but it also has horseshoes and saddles. Even if it is bone wear, it can slowly recover. It runs faster at night than during the day, running non-stop for 24 hours, and can easily reach 13,500 kilometers a day. With this speed and endurance, Fusu was confident that no matter which unlucky guy led his troops to pursue him, he would run his horse to death, constantly changing horses at the post station to chase after him, and vomiting blood. He wouldn't expect to see his own shadow, he would only think he was chasing in the wrong direction. Chapter 3, The Undead System. You are listening at novelfull.audio. System, you're a jerk, but you're a complete jerk. My rocket started. I have already won at the starting line of life. With my modern knowledge and insight, I can make paper, increase agricultural production and expand income, use martial arts to make guns and cannons, and have the prophetic nature of history. It is safe for me to become the king of Qin in the future, and it is well received by everyone. In the future, it is not a problem to unify the world and achieve the titles of the 3 emperors and 5 emperors. As a result, your cheating dad system directly transformed me, and even transformed me into a ghostly appearance that is neither human nor ghost. Have you asked me if I want to transform it? Have you asked me if I want to bind your cheating dad system? Riding his horse all the way, Fusu cursed loudly in his mind all the way. That hatred in my heart. Fusu was very confident that he could become the 2nd emperor of Qin, not only because he knew history and was able to eliminate threats in advance, but also because he could bring huge benefits to everyone from officials to the people, including the various schools of thought. It was too easy to gain support. A safe start to the game. But now that we haven't even started showcasing our skills, we have to run first. If we don't run, we will have to climb the firewood pile, and there is no possibility of reversal. As for pretending to be a fairy in novels, I only know how to summon undead spirits and pretend to be a deity. Ding, host, this system is not called the Kengdai system. The full name of this system is the Wanjie Super Invincible Undead Emperor system. My name is Luo Li. You might as well call it the King Dad system. Just as I traveled through time, I was just a King Dad. Dad just believed in your evil spirit. It was only in my previous life that you were bound to it. What did you say before the crossing? You promised that if you bind you, I will have everything I want. But now, I have started rocket and you have transformed me without saying a word, so I have to run away. Ding, before crossing over, you were already the host and couldn't wait for me to introduce yourself, so you shouted to cross over. But you didn't even say you were the undead system. You just gave me a ding in my mind, saying that you were the strongest group among all the systems, and asked me if I wanted to bind you. After binding, it would take me through time and give me everything I wanted. Then you were silent. Do you say you are the undead system? Do you say you want to modify it after crossing time? Besides, you still want to transform it into this ghostly appearance. Ding, after binding the system, the host can summon endless undead and grab anything they want. There is no such thing in this world, and you can go to other worlds to grab it. That's all you have. Only by transforming into a witch can the host use undead spells perfectly. What the hell am I doing? I can't even find my wife. Ding, when the host is strong, you can have whatever you want. When the host is strong, the daughter-in-law can grab it casually. If she doesn't comply, she will be killed. If she transforms into a undead, she will be obedient. Okay then. Upon hearing this, Fusu's anger decreased slightly. I used to be busy running, but now I can talk about what you're really useful for. Ding, the full name of this system is Wanjie Super Invincible Undead Emperor System, and this system only has 3 functions. What? 3 functions, that's all. You can say that you're the top batch among countless systems. The lowest batch, right? Fusu's voice suddenly rose 30 degrees. Ding, the road is simple. The more powerful a system is, the fewer functions it has. After listening to the functions of this system, the host will know why this system is the strongest among countless systems. It can even be compared to a system with only 2 functions. Speak up. Fusu gritted his teeth. Binding has also been done, wearing has also been traversed, and modifications have been made. There is no other way. Ding. The first feature of this system is the complete code of Undead, which includes all Undead spells from all worlds, including those that can cross the world, and can deduce Undead spells without restrictions. As long as the host's strength meets the standard, it can be learned instantly. Considering that the host is currently too weak, it is recommended that the host choose to learn. Ding. The second function of this system is the retention function. No matter how strong the host's strength is, how many undead spirits are summoned, and how strong the undead strength is, as long as the host is willing, they can indefinitely retain the summoned undead spirits in the current world and remain loyal to the host. Even if the host sends them back to the underworld, they will remain loyal forever. Ding. The third function of this system is the feedback function. For each summoned undead, the host will receive feedback of 1,000th of the strength of the summoned undead, all round. After the summoned undead dies in battle, the host can receive feedback of 1,000th of the strength of the killed undead again, and the undead will become stronger. The host can also receive feedback without the need for cultivation. As long as the host keeps calling the undead, the host can continue to be powerful without limit. In the long run, the individual strength of the host can easily surpass the sum of all living beings in this world, and even the total energy of the entire universe. Fusu was surprised that there were only 3 functions, but they were also the simplest and most powerful, all of which complemented each other. How many undead can I summon now? Fusu asked a crucial question. Ding, currently the host has been transformed into a junior witch demon. Without cultivating and restoring mana, using up mana can summon approximately 300 low-level skeletons. Fusu began to calculate in his heart, then shook his head. Solving geometry problems was too complicated. What is the combat power of a low-level skull? Compared to an ordinary adult male. Ding, in the current world, without considering external factors such as weapons and battle formations, about 3 skeleton soldiers can tie an ordinary adult male with bare hands. If they are soldiers, it takes 5 to 10. Of course, this is only the lowest price for skeleton soldiers compared to standard ordinary adult males. UU reading www.uukangshu.net. Fusu once again calculated that according to the system's description, he only needed to find a barren mountain and wilderness to survive for a year or 2. With a little effort, he could support troops of 1 or 2 million or even more. He could wave freely, even in just 6 months. Even if encountering a 1,000,000-strong army and losing their own sea of undead, with the strength they have gained through their own feedback, they can still come and go freely, and if they cannot, they can still fly, and no one can keep them. It won't be long before I can summon another 1,000,000 soldiers myself, but the enemy doesn't have such quick replenishment capabilities. Big brother, it's almost dawn. Are we chasing in the wrong direction? In the dark wilderness, Meng Yi, holding a torch, had an ugly face. He was originally confident that he had not pursued the wrong direction, but now he also has to doubt whether he has pursued the wrong direction. Meng Tian didn't speak. They had been chasing after the horseshoe print all night. That kind of horseshoe print is very special and has never been seen before, and there is only one such special horseshoe print, so they must have been chasing in the right direction, but they haven't even seen a shadow. He was also surprised that Fusu was only 12 years old. Although he had practiced horsemanship, it was impossible for him to be better than the soldiers on the battlefield. Moreover, the road on this night was difficult to see, and even they couldn't gallop their horses, let alone Fusu. Keep chasing, maybe we'll be catching up soon. Once we reach the post station, we can gather information and exchange horses. We can definitely catch up. Meng Tian shook his head and ordered the pursuit to continue. Meng Yi's face turned black, and he rode his horse all night, feeling a pain. The Qin dynasty did not yet have horseshoes and stirrups, and the saddle was also very simple, but the protagonist had it. Chapter 4, From now on, this is the Undead Mountains. You are listening at Novel Full.audio. 2 nights and 1 day, Fusu had already rode his horse to Itsu, which was more than 2,300 miles away from Xianyang, not a straight distance. After Itsu, it was the Hetao Plain, and further north, it was the cute little Xiongnu. Looking at the Great Wall blocking in front of him, this time Fusu didn't use his eldest son's token to call Guan. He was only 12 years old, and that token was only used in Xianyang. The soldiers here didn't know him, they would only arrest him as a spy for the Dayue clan or the Xiongnu. Then you will discover your current ghostly appearance. Then there was a fire waiting for me. Finally, a story of subduing demons and eliminating them spread among the public. So crossing the Great Wall requires another method. Regarding this, Fusu had already planned to summon some bird spirits, and it was not a matter of minutes before. Taking advantage of the darkness, Fusu summoned 2 more corpse horses and sent them back to the underworld, leaving a reins tied to his waist. Then, he summoned 3 giant eagles with a wingspan of 5 meters and grabbed the reins, flying directly over the Great Wall in the night. Daqin, goodbye. I will be back in 3 years or 2. When the sky is high, birds can fly. The earth is wide, and I can swim. I will take care of those cute little Xiongnu people. In the sky, Fusu waved his hand. When I come back, who dares to put me on the fire again? I will definitely let him know how terrifying the Sea of Undead is. On the other side, Fushu has already crossed the Great Wall 2,000 miles away, and Meng Tian and Meng Yi followed people for about 200 miles. This has already exhausted them to the point of bleeding. At this point, the 2 of them were no longer thinking about how to catch up with Fusu, but about how to face the enraged king of Qin when they returned. At the same time, there is a very important matter to report to the king of Qin. Fusu's horses are equipped with special equipment, which can make their equestrian skills far inferior to theirs. In the case where they may not change horses, the people they change horses and chase at the post station are almost exhausted and vomiting blood without a trace. This equipment is definitely very useful for the army. If it can be obtained, it will definitely play a huge role in future wars. I also hope to use this to distract the attention of the king of Qin. Carrying the corpse eagle, Fusu flew over the fertile Hetao plain and arrived at the Yinshan Mountains. The Yin mountain range is a huge east-west mountain range that separates the north and south. To the south is the Hetao plain, which relies on the mother river, fertile land, and is suitable for agriculture and animal husbandry, while to the north is an endless grassland. The Yinshan Mountains are a very important geographical boundary in the east, starting from Langshan and Wula Mountains in the west, followed by Daqin Mountain and Hutengliang Mountain in the middle, Liangqing Mountain and Huashan Mountain in the south, and the Dama Mountains in the east. It is about 1,200 kilometers long, with an average altitude of 1,500 to 2,000 meters and a peak altitude of 2,000 to 2,400 meters. The Yin mountain range separates the sandstorms and cold air in the north, making it a monsoon area to the south and a non-monsoon area to the north. The superposition of multiple factors has given birth to completely different forms of civilization in the north and south of Yinshan. To the north is the grassland civilization, to the south is the Hetao civilization, to the east is the agricultural civilization, and to the west is the Alxa desert. The important geographical location here has also become the place where the Great Wall is built the most, including the Qin Great Wall, Zhao Great Wall, Han Great Wall, Wei Great Wall, Sui Great Wall, and Ming Great Wall, with a total length of over 10,000 li. For thousands of years, different civilizations have collided here multiple times, giving birth to the timeless quatrain, but let the flying generals of the Dragon City fly, do not teach Huma to navigate the Yin Mountain, which belongs to the forefront of the competition between two different civilizations. In the current era, if the Xiongnu occupied Yinshan, the Hetao region would be easily accessible, and the Central Plains meant that the gateway was wide open, facing the invasion of nomadic tribes heading south at any time. Nowadays, Yinshan was occupied by the Xiongnu, and the Hetao area had already fallen into their hands. Of course, now that Fushu has arrived, this will become a place that the Xiongnu will never be able to cross, dare not step on, and even more so, a place that will make the Xiongnu tremble. From today on, let's call this the Undead Mountains. In the sky, Fusu looked at the continuous mountain range with a burning gaze and muttered to himself. Control the corpse eagle to land in the canyon amidst the steep mountains in the western part of the Yin mountain range. In the darkness of persistence and destruction, wandering souls unwilling to fall, now listen to my call and come from that endless land of struggle. Come out, my servants, corpse soldier group summoning art. In the deep canyon, Fusu raised his hands high and recited a spell. As the sound of the spell echoed through the canyon, a cold wind blew up from Fusu's body. In front of Fusu, a large amount of grey Yin Qi surged out of the ground. Under the cover of the grey Qi, more than 30 dilapidated corpses crawled out of the ground, with their bones and hands breaking through the soil. They were wearing worn-out armor, wearing rusty bullhorn battle helmets on their heads, holding rusty war knives in their hands, and their eyes burning with blue flames. These undead soldiers are not skeleton soldiers, but corpse soldiers. Their combat power is not inferior to that of living soldiers, and even stronger than living soldiers due to the characteristics of their corpses. Looking at the display of these undead spirits, Fushu nodded in satisfaction, which was both dilapidated and intimidating. Ding! Host, you don't need to raise your hands high to summon. When Fusu raises her hands to summon again, the system can't help complaining to Roast. Cut, it just feels more like this, anyway there's no one here. After saying a casual sentence, Yu read a book www.yuyukeangshu.net and Fushu continued to recite the spell. Wake up in the vast and endless white bones, and follow my call to descend into this world, the skeleton soldier group summoning art. As the spell fell, a large amount of grey gas permeated the land in front of Fushu again. In the grey gas, bones and hands broke through the ground, and more than 100 undead spirits crawled out of the ground. Unlike previous corpse soldiers, this time the undead are all dressed in ragged clothes and covered in dense white bones. Even the weapons are bone knives, bone spears, and bone arches connected by tendons and bones. These skeleton soldiers may have weak combat power, but they are the best labor force, most suitable for building thrones, opening roads, and mining mountains. Of course, it is also the cheapest cannon fodder. After 2 summonings, Fusu crossed his knees and began practicing the Lich King cultivation technique given by the system. This is the system recommended and currently the most suitable cultivation method for Fusu, and the name was chosen by Fusu himself. It can absorb the dark energy between heaven and earth and transform it into the energy of the undead, to support Su's current strength and environment. It takes about 2 hours to recover the consumed mana. Of course, it can also absorb and transform the soul fire of the undead to accelerate this process. With a glance from Fushu, more than 30 corpse soldiers immediately walked up to the skeleton soldiers, picked out the defective ones with missing arms and legs, directly smashed their heads, and took out the soul fire inside, holding it to Fushu's mouth. Fusu opened his mouth and sucked in the walnut-sized soul fire, closing his eyes to absorb and refine it. 5 minutes later, Fushu opened his eyes, and the soul fire in his eyes became even brighter. At this speed, he could restore his state to full in about 30 minutes. Seeing Fushu open his eyes, another corpse soldier next to him immediately carried a walnut-sized soul flame to Fushu's mouth. Chapter 5, The Emergence of the Undead. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Time flies like an arrow. In the blink of an eye, Fusu had already spent more than half a year in the Yinshan Mountains. In the past 6 months, Fusu's strength has grown wildly. From summoning a maximum of 100 skeletons at a time, to summoning a maximum of 2,000 skeletons per day, to now summoning 3,000 skeletons at once, and 20,000 skeletons per day. Under the tireless call of Fushu every day, the number of undead under his command also increased day by day, reaching over 1.5 million. Among them, there are also a large number of stronger undead warriors, including skeleton cavalry, corpse cavalry, death cavalry, ghost cavalry, corpse wolf cavalry, zombie warriors, ghost killers, ghost warriors, and death warriors. Amidst the gathering of so many undead spirits, the gloomy and stagnant energy permeated and covered the sky. This place had become an ice field for more than 10 miles, extremely cold, and a truly undead canyon. Even the surrounding high mountains were covered in thick snow. Fusu named this place the Undead Canyon. In the autumn of the Yinshan Mountains, in the evening, a group of Xiongnu cavalry transporting supplies back to the grasslands stopped at the foot of the Bayan Mountains for rest. It is now autumn, and the Central Plains is the season of abundant harvest. Winter will be the most difficult time for grassland resources, so it is now the time for the Xiongnu to go south and plunder on a large scale. Ashina Sabi, are you sure you're not mistaken? In the team of repair, a burly Xiongnu man looked at the man in front of him, his gaze seeming to be saying, "Are you lying to me?" Ashina Sha-cha, I swear by the wolf god, I must have read it right. I have rubbed my eyes and looked at it a few times. There is really a big snow mountain inside, maybe there is some treasure deep in that mountain range. The Xiongnu man who was questioned spoke confidently, even swearing with faith. You better understand the consequences of deceiving the wolf god and deceiving me. Otherwise, there will be no good fruit to eat. Seeing Ashina Sabi so certain, he even swore with the wolf god, Ashina Sabi said seriously. Several people were summoned to climb up to the height of Bayan Mountain together. It took a full half hour for Ashina Cha to climb to the top of Bayan Mountain with people panting heavily. Over there, what I said is true. Ashinasabi pointed deep into the western mountains and said. From a distance, one can see several frozen snow-capped mountains over there. Although it is already autumn now, it has not snowed yet, let alone the scene of heavy snow sealing the mountains. Looking at the top of the snowy mountain over there, Ashina Sha-cha immediately said to her younger brother next to her, rest here for a day today, Ashina Shalv. After you go down the mountain, take 100 people to check, be careful. Don't worry, big brother. Ashina Shalu was ordered to lead 100 cavalry around the mountains for a long time, sometimes leading horses on foot, sometimes riding horses forward, and finally arrived near the Undead Canyon near dusk. At this point, the temperature has significantly dropped, the cold wind is howling, and ice can be seen hanging on stones everywhere. Sand green, our horses are not moving forward anymore, it's useless to fight. A young Xiongnu man said to Ashnashalu, not only his horse, but everyone's horse is like this. As they entered this canyon, their horses were already very uneasy, and it took them a while to calm them down before they arrived here. At this moment, no matter how much they tried to appease and drive away, the horses stopped moving forward, and a few even almost turned their heads and ran away. It's like there's some fierce beast ahead. This situation also caused anxiety and tension in the hearts of these Xiongnu cavalry. Ashina Shalu looked up at the snow-capped mountain peak and said to the others, it's not too far. Leave 10 people to take care of the horses, and the others will walk in with me. Upon hearing this, a group of Xiongnu dismounted one after another, holding weapons, bows and arrows, and continued to advance with Ashina Shalu. After walking for over half an hour, a group of Xiongnu arrived at the corner of the canyon. After turning the corner and entering another larger canyon, the Xiongnu couldn't help but stop and looked ahead in surprise. The canyon ahead is already a scene of winter, with snow and ice gradually increasing. Going further into the canyon, it was completely covered in ice and snow, as if winter had arrived. No, it was like going into the glaciers even further north of the grassland. Plus, as the sun gradually sets, the depths of the canyon become even darker. Are we still moving forward? A Xiongnu asked the envoy, Sha LV, with some nervousness. How ominous this place looks, coupled with the horse's previous performance, it immediately made him feel even more restless and restless. Come on, this is our mission. Ashina Shalu said, take a step forward first. Not far away, a group of Xiongnu completely entered the snow-covered and frozen land. It's really amazing. Looking at the surrounding glacier scenery, Ashina Sand Green let out a sigh of emotion. At this time, it is only recently autumn, and even outside the Yinshan Mountains, it is still hot. Even other parts of the Yinshan Mountains have not seen any snowflakes or ice. Only here, it is a scene of glaciers. There must be treasures inside. Looking at the cold ice and snow around, a Xiongnu walking in front excitedly spoke and reached out to grab a pile of snow standing tall next to him. However, with this grab, the snow on the snow pile slid down a lot, revealing the skeleton in tattered clothes. Looking at the skeletons in the snowdrift, the Xiongnu who were catching the snow suddenly looked a bit dumbfounded, and quickly murmured away the snow in their hands. Others were also speechless as they watched this guy with cheap hands. Ah! Suddenly, a white bone knife pierced through the chest of the lowly Xiongnu, piercing out from his back, and crimson blood drops fell on the white snow. The lowly Xiongnu slowly collapsed, and the murderer was the skeleton in the snowdrift. At this moment, a blue flame ignited in the skeleton's eyes. Seeing this situation, all the Xiongnu were immediately shocked and took out their weapons to watch the skeleton that had killed their companions on guard. Ashnashalu immediately arched and drew arrows. Shoo! An arrow swiftly swept through the air, piercing through the skull's head, and the blue flames that had just ignited in those eyes gradually extinguished. Who? Seeing this, all the Xiongnu breathed a sigh of relief in their hearts, and at this moment, their backs were scared and sweating profusely. Shalu, let's quickly exit. One Xiongnu said, and the other Xiongnu also nodded one after another. Encountering this kind of thing is scary enough. Looking at the towering snowdrifts all over the glacier canyon, the Xiongnu were shivering all over. If it were all that kind of thing inside, the scene would be unimaginable. Retreat, notify the army to come. Ashina Shalu drew her bow and arrows, her eyes fixed on the towering snowdrifts deep in the glacier canyon. She slowly retreated with her people, as if afraid that a louder sound would wake up the things inside. He is sure there must be some amazing treasure inside. But looking at the towering snowdrifts, no one dared to enter again. Roar! Suddenly, a roar rang out in the canyon. In a snowdrift ahead, a skeleton with blue flames burning in its eyes wielded a bone knife and broke through the snow. Shoo! Almost as soon as the skeleton came out, Ashina Shalu had already drawn his bow and shot arrows. Under his superb archery, the arrow accurately shot into the skull's head, extinguishing his soul flame. However, everything was too late. The roar of the skeleton soldier was like a switch, awakening the entire canyon. Roar! In my breath, I saw more and more skeleton soldiers breaking through the snow and roaring. More skeleton soldiers climbed up in the flat snow, holding their bone weapons and roaring. Run! Seeing this situation, Ashina Shalu was shocked and yelled, then turned around and ran. The other Xiongnu were also frightened to the point where their faces turned pale and they all turned around to follow and flee. The next second, countless roaring skeleton soldiers chased after the fleeing Xiongnu soldiers like a tide. The densely packed bone arrows soared like a swarm of locusts, falling towards the fleeing Xiongnu soldiers. A dozen or so Xiongnu soldiers running behind fell in an instant amidst dense bone arrows, each with at least 50 bone arrows inserted into their bodies, like hedgehogs. Chapter 6, It's Time to Go Out. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Ashina Shalu ran wildly all the way, listening to the screams of his subordinates dying behind him. Ashina Shalu dared not look back. The felt hat on his head was lost. In order to run faster, he kept throwing away all his belongings, including swords, shields, bows and arrows, and axes. As he ran wildly, he felt his legs running so fast that he couldn't feel anything. In just one stick of incense, he ran away from the road he had walked for half an hour before, and could already see the people and horses who had stayed here from afar. He swore that he had never run so fast, nor had he ever run so far before. When charging on the battlefield, he had never run so fast or so far before. His aunt chased after him with a whip, but it was not enough. At this moment, he only hated her for giving him 2 legs, and it was not good to give him as much as a horse. What do you care about his dad? Hey, drive the horse over. From afar, Ashina Shalu shouted to the people who were left behind, hoping that his companions could drive their horses over so that they could ride and run. What did you shout? I didn't hear it. Herbayo, did you hear me? No. What about others? Look at that sand green look, I'm afraid I found something amazing, right? Look at this. Everyone's dancing and dancing. In the distance, when hearing Ashina Shalu's shout, the 10 remaining Xiongnu did not hear clearly. They looked at Ashina Shalu rushing towards them one by one, questioning each other in confusion. Sigh, sigh. Without waiting for them to discuss a result, all the warhorses under their care were startled and screamed, turning their heads and running away without any regard. The 10 remaining Xiongnu saw this and quickly ran to grab the reins of the horses, or rode on their backs, trying to stabilize them. But at this moment, these horses are determined to run, even if they desperately pull the reins, they are uncontrollable. One of the Xiongnu turned around in panic and glanced at the rushing Ashina Sand Green. With just one glance, he was so scared that flax froze. Behind the Ashina Sand Green, countless skeleton soldiers rushed like a flood. Drive! Jia 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 jia. The next second, the Xiongnu's 2 feet immediately exerted force to clamp the horse's belly, shouting and drinking incessantly in their mouths, so anxious that their voices were broken, and they followed the fleeing horse away completely. The other Xiongnu saw this and immediately cursed in their hearts. We are desperately trying to hold on to the frightened horse here, and you can just shout and drive. After a while, Ashina Shalu arrived and had to curse them to death. He had to be whipped twice. Thinking of Ashina Sand Green, the remaining 9 Xiongnu couldn't help but turn their heads and take a look. Drive! The next second, among the remaining Xiongnu, 2 horses on horseback hurriedly shouted to drive away. The Xiongnu, who were standing on the ground desperately pulling on the reins, were also running wildly, even if they were dragged by horses, they dared not let go. Damn it! Looking at a few breaths, a clean person and horse ran away, and Ashina's green eyes were about to crack. He can run here, he's already running fast and can't move. But he could only grit his teeth and continue to run desperately. The next second, he stumbled to a stop while brewing, and a rusty spear pierced through his chest. Behind him, a dead cavalry rode over and stopped beside his body. Carrying a knight's sword on his back, his old armor was covered in sword marks, and the bones visible through the cracks were all black. The black skull under the helmet burned with a fiercer and bluer flame than the other skeletons. Even the skeleton horse under the seat is covered in armor, with shields, axes, meteor hammers, and bows and arrows hanging from its body. Death Cavalry, a premium item among the undead. Behind this Death Cavalry, more and more Death Cavalry are coming on horseback. Although they are equipped differently, each one is covered with traces of swords, and the oppressive atmosphere makes people feel like they have seen death. Roar! With a roar, 300 Death Cavalry charged towards the fleeing Xiongnu and horses. The rumbling sound of horse hooves sounded like an avalanche. Although they only had 300 cavalry, their momentum in charge was even greater than that of thousands of cavalry charging forward. After sunset, in the Undead Canyon, millions of undead have all awakened, and their formation is complete. The faint blue flames adorn the entire canyon like the Milky Way. Originally, it's already autumn. The Xiongnu have all come to plunder. I should go out and take a look too. Say hello to those little Xiongnu cuties. Fusu patted the two tongues sticking out beside him, revealing a smile. Immediately, a death knight drove a black car to Fushu, pulled by 8 skeleton saber-toothed tigers, all black with metallic colors on their bones, indicating that their level was the same as that of the death knight. Let's go. With the order of Fusu. The 8-headed skeleton saber-toothed tiger pulled the car and began to move forward. On both sides of the frame, there are 200 ghost cavalry and corpse wolf cavalry following. With this sound, millions of undead spirits marched towards the outside of the canyon, and a faint blue flame flowed like a Milky Way in the canyon. A large number of bird spirits quickly flew out of the canyon. Of course, Fusu also left over 500,000 undead guardians and repaired roads. What kind of treasure do you think there will be in the depths of those mountains? Legend has it that treasures are guarded by powerful exotic beasts. Can Ashina Shalu and his companions deal with these beasts? At the foot of Mount Bayan in the dark, the station Xiongnu set up a bonfire, roasting meat around the bonfire, discussing and speculating on what was deep in the mountains. During the discussion, on both sides of the campfire, the horses tied to the carriage suddenly began to scream in surprise, with people constantly standing up, trying to break free from their restraints and escape. Are the horses frightened? Go and calm them down. Everyone be on guard, there may be fierce beasts around you. Reading www.uukangshu.net. Seeing the horse startled, Ashina Shacha quickly ordered. A group of Xiongnu stood up one after another, their eyes alert as they looked around, drew their swords, and drew their bows to guard. Boom boom. The rumbling sound of horse hooves came from the entrance of the nearby canyon. The sound of hooves. Upon hearing the sound of horse hooves, the Xiongnu couldn't help but turn their gaze to the dim fork in the canyon, where a faint blue flame was coming towards them. This made everyone frown uncontrollably. It's sand green and they're back. Ashina Sabi said indifferently, holding half a chicken in his hand and tearing it apart. As the words fell, a black arrow flew from the darkness, hitting the center of Ashina Sabi's eyebrows and piercing through the back of his head. Shio. The next second, more and more arrows shot out from the darkness, instantly overturning the top 10 Xiongnu. Each arrow hit the head and neck, and each arrow could pierce through the human body. Enemy attack. Ashina Shacha shouted loudly and ran with people towards the carriage parked on either side of the campfire, shooting arrows in the direction of the blue flames. Here we go, prepare for melee. After 2 or 3 rounds of archery counterattacks, Ashina Shacha shouted loudly as she listened to the rumbling sound of horse hooves. The Xiongnu put down their bows and arrows, picked up their machetes and spears, and prepared to welcome the approaching cavalry. The next second, amidst the frightened screams of the horses, the enemy in the darkness finally appeared. Roar! Watching the skull roaring with blue flames, Ashina Shacha's face turned pale with fear, and her frightened eyes reflected the rapidly falling meteor hammer. Chapter 7, The Undead Leaving the Frontier. You are listening at novelfull.audio. In the darkness, surrounded by millions of undead, the frame of Fusu slowly stopped in front of the Xiongnu's camp. The Death Knight, who was driving, respectfully pulled open the curtains of the car. A corpse tiger and a corpse wolf immediately lay beside the frame, acting as 2 steps. Fusu walked out of the frame, stepped on the back of the tiger and wolf, got off the car, and looked at the scattered corpses and dozens of goods, feeling his chin and pondering. The dead souls obey my call, search for their former bodies to return to your deceased bodies, obey my command, and the dead will revive. After a while, Fusu recited a spell from his mouth. In an instant, a large amount of grey smoke surged from the ground, covering the dead Xiongnu soldiers and horses. Who? In the grey smoke, the dead Xiongnu soldiers and horses suddenly opened their eyes and stiffly flipped over, kneeling and kowtowing to Fusu, with their foreheads tightly pressed against the ground. At this moment, their eyes had already turned a faint blue. Pack up everything and bake me a chicken. Decorate my frame and make it softer inside. Make me some clothes and a few hooded robes. Fusu said and walked to the edge of the extinguished fire. The corpse wolf and corpse tiger immediately lay behind Fushu as cushions and backrests. The skull mage quickly came over and lit the bonfire, and the death warrior immediately brought firewood and added it to the bonfire. A dozen female ghosts quickly arrived at the fire and danced gracefully. Dozens of skeleton soldiers played on their drilled arms, pounded on their skulls, pulled on their sinuous thighs, or played on their own ribs, adding down-to-earth music to the dance of female ghosts. As soon as his right hand was lifted, a death warrior immediately brought a skull to allow Fusu to beat the rhythm. Although this kind of enjoyment is very down-to-earth, it is the only way to enjoy it in the past 6 months in Fushu, and I have long been accustomed to it. Due to the lack of supplies, I still stripped off the clothes on my body, and the frame of this car was also made by dismantling the bones of the deceased and fusing their weapons. Since we're going out now, we certainly can't be shabby in terms of temperament. While waiting in Fusu, the Xiongnu corpses quickly sorted out scattered supplies. A necromancer lit another bonfire, quickly plucked and cleaned the dead chickens, and put them on a curved knife to roast. More than 100 ghosts quickly rummaged through the supplies snatched by the Xiongnu to find fabrics, silk, jewelry, and needles, decorating the frame of the Fusu, sewing the clothes required by the Fusu, and even making several beautiful pendants for the 8-headed saber-toothed tiger pulling the cart. In the moonlit canyon, 5 Xiongnu scouts were lying on a small hill 300 to 500 meters high, with pale faces. If it weren't for what they saw with their own eyes, they probably wouldn't have believed what they saw. The entire canyon was crowded with skeletons and monsters, densely packed and countless, with a faint blue flame that stretched out like a river beyond sight. They estimate that there is as much as 300,000 within sight. Go back and report. This mountain cannot be crossed. One of the Xiongnu whispered and quietly retreated down the mountain slope with his 4 brothers. Wow! Suddenly, a Xiongnu slipped his hand and overturned a large stone on the hillside, rolling towards the undead in the canyon like a river with a clattering sound. Seeing this situation, the 5 Xiongnu were all about to crack their eyes and nervously watched as the stones rolled away in the moonlight. Roar! Not long after, there was a sudden roar from the foot of the mountain, followed by more and more roars. Amidst the horrified gaze of the 5 Xiongnu, a large number of ghosts and monsters began to charge towards the hillside. Run quickly! A Xiongnu shouted softly, then turned around and ran towards the slope behind him. In the sky, blue stars flew rapidly towards the hillside, and there were zombie eagles. Several fleeing Xiongnu had nowhere to hide in the sharp gaze of the corpse eagle. Ambitious and hungry to eat the meat of the barbarians, laughing and thirsty to drink the blood of the Xiongnu. Beside the bonfire, Fushu, who was enjoying the grilled chicken, paused for a moment, muttering a poem and his gaze exuding a murderous aura. Perhaps I should choose the grassland first. Complete an achievement of sealing off the wolf and settling in the Sioux before returning to the Central Plains. It's also good to achieve success and return home in glory. Let that cheap old man see my abilities as the Lich King. Wow! With Fushu's words, millions of undead spirits in the canyon turned around and began to move towards the north of the canyon. 3 kilometers away from the entrance of the grasslands in the Yinshan Mountains, 30,000 Xiongnu cavalry camped and rested here. In the central tent, 2 men lay alone on a sheepskin mattress, feeling anxious, tossing and turning, unable to fall asleep. And it was not just him who felt this way, almost all the 30,000 Xiongnu were like this, and few could sleep. All of this is because their horses appeared very uneasy after arriving here, afraid to move forward, as if there were some fierce beasts in the Yin mountain ahead. The collective unease of the horses made 2-man Chanyu wary and immediately came down to camp in place, while sending a large number of scouts into the Yin mountain range for reconnaissance. But when those scout horses approached the entrance of Yin mountain, they dared not move forward no matter what. Pacification and whipping were ineffective, and even horses that had been raised for over a decade ran away. The reconnaissance cavalry can only enter the Een Mountain. The person who reciprocated also said that the wind blowing out of the Een Mountain Canyon was very cold, making people shiver all over and their hair stand up. This unprecedented situation immediately made two-man Chanyu's vigilance turn into unease, feeling like there was some great terror in the Een Mountain reflected by the moonlight ahead. But he couldn't figure out why even now. The Hetao Plain across from Een Mountain has been occupied by them for many years, and the entrances and exits of Een Mountain are also guarded by soldiers. The Central Plains dynasties were unable to send troops to ambush Een Mountain. Sigh the law. Suddenly, the beloved horse tied outside the tent let out a terrifying hissing sound. This startled two-man Chanyu to sit up, pulled back the blanket, grabbed his sword, and hurriedly walked out. Sigh the law. The next second, the sound of horses screaming in this camp grew more and more, and the entire camp's horses began to sizzle anxiously. The resting Xiongnu were also awakened by this situation, and one by one ran out of the tent with weapons to check. I saw all the horses in the camp hissing, struggling to break free from the reins and escape. Pacify the horses quickly. Send cavalry to scout the surroundings immediately. Everyone prepare for battle. Headman Chanyu left the tent and immediately issued orders one after another upon seeing such a scene. Anyway, it's not a good thing for horses to be collectively frightened and even want to escape, let alone coincidentally. What is that? At the edge of the camp, a Xiongnu soldier busy calming his horses suddenly pointed in the direction of Een Mountain and shouted. Upon hearing this, the Xiongnu on the edge of other camps also turned their gaze. A faint blue light rose in the direction of the entrance to the Een Mountain range in the distance. This situation immediately confused these Xiongnu, as they had never seen or heard of such a situation before. Hurry up and report to the Danyu. The horses are all frightened, probably because of the blue light they have never seen before. Everyone, forget about the horses. Yu read a book www.uukangshu.net. Get ready for battle. A middle-aged Xiongnu ordered to the soldiers beside him, looking solemnly at the blue light in the distance and quickly giving the order. The light seemed to be getting closer and closer, and a faint roar could be heard. After half a pillar of incense, two-man Chanyu hurriedly arrived, and a large number of Xiongnu soldiers hastily formed a formation. At this moment, the blue flame was only a few hundred meters away from here, and the roar was already very clear, as if thousands of troops and horses were shouting. Run away! The ghosts are here! Suddenly, more than a dozen soldiers with anxious faces ran back in the dark night. It was the soldiers sent out for reconnaissance, and at this moment, they were still shouting in terror. Two-man Chanyu grabbed a panicked detective and loudly asked, "What's going on?" "It's ghosts, countless ghosts, they're here, they're coming soon. Run away, run away." The captured Xiongnu detective's face was flustered, and he didn't recognize that the person in front of him was Chanyu for a moment. Just constantly shouting in fear. Bastard! Demonic words deceive the crowd. Two-man Chanyu suddenly became furious and slashed the Xiongnu scout in front of him, shouting loudly, "Prepare to fight. Those who disturb the morale of the army, kill." The soldiers were about to respond loudly, but the next second, they all stared at the approaching dark blue flames, their bodies trembling uncontrollably. The faint blue flames illuminated a forest of white bones holding weapons, densely packed and incalculable in number. Escape. A word popped up in the minds of many Xiongnu. Block, those who retreat, chop. Behind, Chanyu's voice came from afar. A soldier turned around and saw their great Chanyu running towards a warhorse tied to the tent. Chapter 8, The Oppression of the Lich King. You are listening at novelfull.audio. When they saw the enemy charging towards them, these usually fierce and brutal Xiongnu soldiers trembled, and many people's hands holding weapons were trembling. Some even wet their pants. Escape. I don't know who shouted first, but then a large number of Xiongnu turned around and ran, competing for horses. For a moment, the Xiongnu's defense line was chaotic, with countless people being bumped, pushed, and knocked to the ground. Roar! Amidst the roar, countless skeletal soldiers rushed forward like a tsunami, instantly drowning the already scattered Xiongnu defense line. The dense undead continued to charge, and the density was as crowded as a hallway after school. They slaughtered everything they saw, pushed down tents, stepped on fire extinguishers, and quickly spread like a blue and white tide, flooding the entire Xiongnu camp. The sounds of panic, screams, and the hissing of horses kept ringing and disappearing in the camp. Wolf God! What the hell is going on? Aren't you protecting your people anymore? Headman Chanyu, who escaped on horseback with 30 people, turned around and glanced at the gradually engulfed camp with blue and white and suddenly cried out in sorrow. Out of 30,000 soldiers and horses, only over 1,000 escaped, and there were only about 30 people around him. Boom boom. In sadness, there was a sudden rumbling sound of horse hooves on the left side. Two-man Chanyu hurriedly looked around and saw a large number of blue flames chasing towards him on the left. I can vaguely see the dense and white skeleton shape. Drive, drive. Seeing this situation, two-man Chanyu's soul suddenly surged, and he immediately whipped the horse with his whip, hoping that it could run faster. Perhaps at this moment, the horse was thinking that without you urging me, I was also running with a sucking energy. Perhaps without you on my back, I could run faster. In the early morning, a red sun rose from the distant mountains, bringing light to the dark grasslands. But the warm sunshine shone on the disheveled head of Manchanyu's face, but it couldn't bring him any warmth or hope, only cold and despair. At this moment, he had been captured by the skeleton cavalry and was surrounded by 3,000 captured compatriots, each with a face full of despair. And their surroundings were densely packed, surrounded by countless skeleton spearmen, with a forest of bone spears like a forest of death. Roar! 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 Suddenly, the undead surrounding them all roared and their spears kept lifting and pounding on the grass. In the south of the encirclement, the undead made way for a 30-meter-wide passage. A team of armor was covered in sword marks, and a terrifying death warrior stepped forward, splitting on both sides of the passage. The head of the captives, Manchanyu, saw this and knew that it was the king of these ghost soldiers who had arrived. Hope rose in his eyes, perhaps he could survive. Immediately, two men whispered a few words to the Xiongnu around him, asking them to pass them on to more people. In his sparse gaze, a large group of dead cavalry escorted a carriage slowly approaching. The one pulling the carriage was an 8-headed, 3-meter-high, armored black bone giant beast, whose upper jaws were as terrifying as two swords. Surrounding the frame, there are also numerous ghost assassins, ghost cavalry, death cavalry, and skeleton mages. Kneel down. As the frame arrived, the first skeleton mage immediately shouted loudly at the captured 3,000 Xiongnu. Roar, roar. Wow! With this reprimand, the skeletal spearmen surrounding the Xiongnu roared again, their spears all flattened and aimed at the 3,000 Xiongnu prisoners trapped in the middle. Under this influence, the Xiongnu could only kneel on the ground trembling, with their buttocks raised and their heads touching the ground. Among the Xiongnu prisoners, only two-man Chanyu and more than 20 Xiongnu around him did not kneel down, standing straight in the midst of a group of kneeling Xiongnu. If you see my king, why don't you kneel down? The skeleton mage immediately asked when he saw the situation. The staff in his hand condensed a purple thunderbolt around him, as if he was about to kill these people who didn't kneel at any time. I am the Xiongnu Chanyu, do not kneel when you see the king. Faced with the threat of the skull mage, the Xiongnu Shanyutuman loudly responded, still holding his head high and chest high. Even if captured at this moment, his life could pass away at any moment, and he did not lose the spirit of the Xiongnu king. Bold! The skeleton mage let out a loud shout, lifted his staff in his hand, and the thunder on it became even denser. Oh! Xiongnu Chanyu! Just as the skull mage was about to kill the disrespectful one, Fusu's voice rang out from the frame. Immediately after, the Death Knight driving slowly pulled open the curtain of the frame, and a person wearing black and blue armor, a strange helmet, a large sword hanging from the waist, and blue flames burning in his eyes walked out of the frame. A tiger and a wolf quickly ran to the edge of the frame and lay down, like 2 steps, waiting for their owner to get off at any time. When the man stepped out of the frame, those who were still standing, such as 2 men, were immediately shocked, as if they had seen a terrifying monster, and a terrifying aura oppressed them. Suddenly, the Xiongnu kneeling on the ground trembled even more, and the Xiongnu beside 2 men couldn't withstand the pressure, as if they were being pressed by an invisible hand. They trembled and slowly knelt down one by one. The terrifying aura instantly overwhelmed the remaining Xiongnu Chanyu, like a mountain pressing down on this arrogant and intimidating Xiongnu Chanyu. He gritted his teeth tightly, bleeding his gums, but the Xiongnu Chanyu persisted and did not kneel down. He is the head man, the first person to unify the Xiongnu tribe, and the first Chanyu of the Xiongnu. He must not kneel down. With this belief, 2-man Chanyu's already slowly bent waist straightened up again. It's a bit interesting. Then I'll see if it's your Xiongnu King's arrogance or my sword. Looking at the Xiongnu Chanyu who would rather die than surrender, Fusu said calmly, revealing a meaningful smile. Even with swords and swords, I will never kneel down to you. 2-man Chanyu spoke loudly without any fear. Fusu smiled inexplicably and didn't say anything, then turned around and walked back into the frame. The skeleton mage accompanying the car immediately ordered, in groups of 100, chop off the head until he kneels down. The Death Knight driving gently lowered the car curtain. 200 death warriors immediately approached with large knives, working in pairs and forcefully grabbing the trembling Xiongnu prisoners kneeling on the outskirts. Yu reading www.uukangshu.net, their hands began to fall with knives, and suddenly 100 heads rolled down. The Xiongnu behind were frightened and turned pale, trembling even more violently. Immediately after, the hands of the Death Knights reached out to them, lifting them up like chicks. I don't want to die. I don't want to die. Leave me alone, I have already knelt down. Don't kill me, please, don't kill me. These captured Xiongnu struggled in fear and begged for mercy in fear. But their struggle in front of these 2-meter-tall death warriors is as pale and powerless as the Central Plains women who were once plundered by them. Their plea for mercy was ignored by these death warriors. A few unselected Xiongnu wanted to resist, but were split in half by a death warrior's knife. Blood and dirt splattered on the faces and bodies of the kneeling Xiongnu, causing many of them to collapse to the ground. The peripheral Xiongnu wanted to resist, but the bone spears of Mori Lingli aimed at them, leaving them with no chance. At this time, most of the Xiongnu had already lost their fighting spirit. At the next moment, another 100 heads rolled down. The death warriors threw away their bodies, grabbed the third batch of people, and raised their swords to prepare to chop them down. Watching this scene, 2-man Chanyu gritted his teeth and wished he could go up and fight. I kneel. If you don't kill my clan, I will kneel. Headman Chanyu finally shouted out. Poo 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 poo. The raised big knife still fell, and 100 heads rolled down to the ground. But no more people were caught. 2-man Chanyu saw the situation, clenched his fist and gritted his teeth tightly. Kneeling slowly on the ground, his buttocks raised high and his head lowered on the grass. My king said, kneel closer. Chapter 9, Remember, I am the Lich King Fusu. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Upon hearing the words of the skeleton mage, 2-man Chanyu gritted his teeth and knelt on the ground, using both hands and feet, crawling out like a dog. He lowered his head, gritted his teeth, and climbed 20 steps in front of the frame before being stopped by 2 death warriors. Sniff! The corpse tiger walked up to 2-man Chanyu and twitched its nose, sniffing as if it would open its bloody jaws and bite down at any moment. Looking at the decaying flesh and blood on the corpse tiger, 2-man lowered his head even lower. It seems that your pride and bones are not as hard as my sword. In the frame, the sound of Fusu slowly came out. Headman Chanyu gritted his teeth and once again touched his head on the ground, shouting loudly, "Please spare my clan. The Xiongnu are willing to bow down and pay homage to you. But for me, only the dead can be loyal." In the frame, Fusu's voice echoed again, his words filled with disdain. "I am willing to imprison the child and send it to your account as a slave. Let you drive it." The Xiongnu leader Manchanyu gritted his teeth and said, "Hurry up. If my son is gone, I will have another one, but I can't protect you or the Xiongnu." The voice of Fusu echoed again from the carriage. Upon hearing this, two-man Chanyu gritted his teeth and pulled out the dagger from his waist, raising it high. Just as the death warrior was preparing to escort him, two-man Chanyu gritted his teeth, raised a dagger, and fiercely stabbed his poison pill before pulling it. At this moment, even the undead around couldn't help but admire two-man Chanyu, who truly could unify the Xiongnu. He was ruthless and wolf-like. Two-man Chanyu threw away his dagger and pulled out a bloody caterpillar from his crotch, holding it high and trembling, saying, "I no longer have offspring. Now, Feiduan is my only offspring." At this moment, there was no speech in the carriage. For a while, waiting became the most agonizing thing for two-man. Remove all Xiongnu from the Hutao area by the end of the month. Those who do not leave after the deadline will never have to leave. From now on, without my permission, Xiongnu are not allowed to cross the Yinshan Mountains, which are now called the Undead Mountains. Also, send your mother and beloved wife to the Undead Mountains. When you don't do Chanyu anymore, take them back. From now on, the Xiongnu will annually pay tribute to the Undead Mountains with 200,000 intact human bones, 3 million stones of bones from cattle, sheep, horses, and other animals, and 500 stones of copper and iron tools. If there is a stone difference, then use blood and flesh to make up for it. I will see this year's tribute before the New Year's Eve. Of course, you can also try to gather tribes on the grassland to resist, or organize ethnic migrations, but the consequences of failure must be carefully considered. Hee. The voice of Fusu finally came from the carriage. Upon hearing these words, two-man Chanyu suddenly felt a chill all over his body, but he had to grit his teeth and respectfully say, "Yes. I'll leave you an immortal cavalry. I hope you can make good use of them, you should be quite familiar with them. Remember, I am the Lich King Fusu. Don't even know who you are bowing down to." The voice of Fusu echoed again from the carriage. As the words fell, the frame turned and left. The following skeleton mage took out a cup polished with elephant bones and picked up the caterpillar held high by the head before catching up with Fusu's car. Scream! 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 Surrounded by thousands of undead spirits, they turned around in a neat and orderly manner, following the frame with neat steps and leaving. Farewell to the Lich King. As he watched the frame leave, two-man Chanyu shouted loudly again, deeply touching his head on the grass. At this moment, he dared not look up, afraid that his eyes, which were about to crack, would be seen by the undead around him. He really wanted to assassinate just now, taking the Lich King in the frame as a hostage to survive, and he even made an agreement with his subordinates. But the Lich King's aura was too terrifying, but he was 20 steps away from the frame, with a corpse tiger blocking in front of him. Surrounded by powerful death warriors, death cavalry, ghost cavalry, and ghost assassins, he had no chance at all. Not only will it not succeed, everyone will die, and even the entire Xiongnu will be irreparable. De Chanyu. When the surrounding undead army left, Tumen's subordinates immediately rushed over and panicked, surrounding two-man. No one blamed two-man Chanyu for kneeling down, nor did anyone look down on two-man, but he was deeply moved. Two-man was not even afraid to die, but at this moment he knelt down to protect them, losing his dignity even more. But these Xiongnu warriors all knelt down early on. Quick, stop the bleeding for Chanyu. Looking at the bleeding pants of two-man, one Xiongnu quickly shouted, while the other Xiongnu took out a golden wound medicine from his body and poured it onto his calloused hand, applying medicine to stop the bleeding of two men. "Listen," the pale-headed man weakly said, "immediately send someone to the Hetao Plain, withdraw all clans from the Hetao Plain by the end of the month, and send all the cattle, sheep, and horses that cannot be taken away to Daqin. Those who cannot be withdrawn should also be incorporated into Daqin, otherwise they will be in danger of survival. From now on, the Yinshan Mountains will be renamed as the Undead Mountains. Our Xiongnu will bow down to the Lich King and pay tribute every year to the Lich King Fusu, offering 200,000 complete human bones, 3 million stones of cattle, sheep, and horses' bones, 500 stones of copper and iron tools, all of which will be filled with flesh and blood. This year's tribute will be sent to the Undead Mountains before the new year. Immediately send someone back to their tribe, take my son as a hostage, and send my mother and all my wives and concubines to the Undead Mountains as collateral. If I die, let the new Chanyu be like me. Otherwise, the Xiongnu may perish." After persisting to finish speaking, Yu reading www.yuukangshu.net turned his head and fainted. He was afraid that if he fainted, he would never wake up again. The Xiongnu did not know about paying tribute, which would lead to disaster. Having personally experienced it, he knew very well that the current Xiongnu could never resist the Lich King, and resistance could only lead to destruction. He also considered the migration of the Zhu ethnic group, but Zhu migration is not just about leaving. And further north is the vast glacier. Now that it has entered winter and is frozen for thousands of miles, going there is seeking death. To the west lies the Gobi Desert, with even the powerful Deyue clan. To the east is the Donghu, with greater strength than the Xiongnu. They will be blocked no matter where they migrate, and the Lich King will not let them go. They will only be sandwiched between two sides, adding fuel to the fire. Upon hearing Tumen's words, the Xiongnu also looked at each other in confusion. 500 stones of copper and iron artifacts are not difficult, but there are still some that can be pieced together. Although there are many bones of 3 million stone cattle, sheep, and horses that can be scraped together with a bit of hard work, those 200,000 human bones. Boom boom. Around, the sound of hooves roared, and 30,000 cavalry rode over and stopped around. These were all subordinates led by two men before, but at this moment, whether they were horses or falcons, their faces turned pale and their eyes had turned eerie blue. Looking at these familiar faces and the scars all over their bodies, the still-living Xiongnu suddenly felt a chill all over them. At this moment, they feel that the 200,000 complete human bones are not impossible to find a way out. Living talents are important. The continuation of ethnic groups is important. It's not about asking for a corpse. I don't have to dig my own house either. The Xiongnu couldn't help but comfort themselves in their hearts. Chapter 10, For Overseas Returnees 1 Map and World Map. You are listening at novelfull.audio. After careful consideration, I still wrote this chapter. On the other hand, in the Central Plains, the Great Qin had already begun the war of annihilating Han. In the state of Qin, Xianyang, and the Imperial Palace, a father and son pair of painters presented a picture of the return of the four seas to the King of Qin. Upon hearing this news, Zulong brought Zhao Nu to the side hall, preparing to take a look at this picture of the four seas returning to one. Exhibition. With Zhao Gao's command, the four inner supervisors slowly unfolded the huge picture scroll that had already been placed on the ground. When the picture was fully opened, Zhao Gao immediately reported to the King of Qin, "Your Majesty, this is the picture of the four seas returning to one." Looking at the picture unfolding in front of him, Zulong couldn't help but get drunk, and Zhao Nu beside him was also stunned. This unified map of the four seas is not about humans or objects, flowers or grass, nor about immortal mountains and rivers. It is a huge map that includes Qin, Han, and even 7 countries. The cities of each country are marked on the map. A father and son dressed in ordinary clothes bent down and approached Zulong, kneeling and bowing deeply, their bodies trembling slightly. The picture was drawn by the two of you. Well done. Are you from the state of Qin? Looking at the painter and son in front of him, Zulong asked. The voice was gentle, obviously very satisfied with this unified picture of the four seas. Your Majesty, they are Han people. Zhao Gao whispered beside him, feeling a bit uneasy. At this moment, the painter father and son also slowly lifted their heads, but the two were already in tears. That's it, Han is about to perish, Zulong said slowly as he looked at the tearful father and son in front of him. I suddenly realized that these two people presented such a grand map not for Han, but for the people of Han. Immediately, Zulong said gently to the two, you are crying for your own country. You are the good people of Han, and all the people of Han are crying because your king asked them to offer 1,000 horses, 100,000 gold, and 1,000,000 bundles of silk as gifts for the state of Qin. Zulong bent down and continued to say gently to the two, I don't want gifts from the Korean people. These gifts should be used by the Korean people themselves. Upon hearing this, the father-son painter once again kowtowed deeply. Zulong's gaze couldn't help but turn to the picture of the four seas returning to one on the ground, and his tone became firm. Han is about to perish, but you will have a larger, much larger country, Qin and 6 kingdoms, visible and invisible, all becoming one country. The people of this country are its people, and there is only one king, a good ruler. When the 6 kingdoms were destroyed, this king wanted to rescue the people there and established counties everywhere, allowing honest officials to manage them. Let the whole land be covered with millet, so that the people can live and work in peace, build the Taoist priest to the border, and build the Great Wall to the distance. When the Huns and the barbarians invade, they block their horses' hooves, set the stone tablet on Mount Taishan, and erect the stone tablet on the sea, to commemorate the unity of the world. Listening to Zulong's description, the two painters couldn't help but be stunned. The woman next to her, Zhao, was also stunned and couldn't help but have a look of longing in her eyes. Meanwhile, in the Undead Mountains. Wang, the map you requested has been drawn. On the vast ice plain, 65-meter-tall giant corpse soldiers unfolded a huge map in front of Fusu. This is a huge map 150 meters long and 100 meters wide, sewn together from the fur of various animals from different regions. There are not only the Qin state, but also the other 6 states, as well as places outside the Qin state, such as the Xiongnu, Donghu, Deyue clan, and even further west, such as Fusang on the other side of the ocean. This is a world map of the current world, and it is very detailed. Not only have all the cities in the world been drawn, but there are also larger villages, wider roads, and rivers. This was created by Fusu sending 10,000 different bird spirits to fly around the world, receiving images from 200 skeleton mages, day and night non-stop, and taking 2 months to draw. Xianyang, State of Qin. Your Majesty. The next day, Proton Yendan learned that the Qin army had begun attacking the Han capital Xinjiang, and hurriedly found Zulong and Zhao Nu with a sword. Seeing Yendan approaching with a sword, the guards immediately blocked him outside the door. Step aside, dare you stop me, Your Majesty, Zheng. Being forcibly pulled by the guards, Yendan became extremely anxious and even shouted out the name of the ancestral dragon. Bold! Wang Ben, who was guarding Zulong, immediately stepped forward and shouted loudly. Let him come over. Watching Yendan being stopped, Zulong finally spoke up, but his mood was not good as he watched Yendan come with a sword. After being released by the guards, Yendan immediately strode in with a sword, stopping 5 steps away from Zheng. He held the sword in one hand and the hilt in the other, staring fixedly at Zulong. Don't you kneel when you see the king? Wang Ben took a step forward and reprimanded, ready to draw his sword at any time. I am the crown prince of Yen, don't kneel when you see the king. Yendan looked up and straightened her chest, her words full of energy. When talking about Yen Kingdom, her gaze also turned to the direction of Yen Kingdom. You guys talk. Zhao Nu saw this situation and said to Zulong, then she wanted to leave alone. Zhao Nu, don't leave. Yen Dan saw it and immediately shouted. He knows that Zulong dotes on Zhao Nu, and he also knows that Zhao Nu has a kind heart. Perhaps today's matter will require Zhao Nu's help. After seeing Zhao's daughter stop and stay, Yen Dan then held the sword handle and continued, Yen Dan requests your majesty to stop attacking Han, and Yen Dan requests your majesty to have peace with the 6 countries. Otherwise. Zulong looked at Yen Dan, who was gripping the hilt tightly, feeling a bit lost in thought and asked, what else? Yen Dan looked resolute and said, within 5 steps, Yen Dan's blood will be mixed with his majesty's blood. Zulong couldn't help but smile at the words and said in a low voice, if you kill me, someone will do this too. It's not me, maybe it's you. Yen Dan couldn't help but be stunned at the words. Zulong continued, it has been 550 years. Where have the hundreds of vassal states gone? Now there are only 7 left. Small countries want to become big countries want to annex small countries, and the war will not stop. The war of 550 years will not stop, and it cannot stop. The people seem to live in a world of fire and water. As long as the 6 countries are still here, the war will not stop, and the world will never be peaceful. The people will never be peaceful. During his speech, Zulong's tone and expression became incredibly firm. Upon hearing this, Yen Dan immediately drew his sword and pointed it at the ancestral dragon. Upon seeing this, the surrounding guards also drew out their weapons and aimed them at Yen Dan. Wang Ben immediately stood in front of Zulong and held his sword at Yen Dan. Yen Dan was not afraid of the swords of the surrounding guards and immediately refuted Zulong, saying, why don't you say that as long as the state of Qin is still alive, the world will not be peaceful? Zulong patted Wang Ben's shoulder and gestured for him to move away, heading straight towards Yen Dan. Don't come up. Seeing this situation, Yen Dan's sword pointed at the ancestral dragon, but his hand was already trembling slightly. Zulong was not afraid of Yen Dan's sword and walked straight to Yen Dan's sword. Yen Dan saw the gaze of Zulong, and her sword-wielding hand immediately drooped. Zulong looked into Yen Dan's eyes and said slowly, I know you want to go back to Yen Kingdom. I can let you go, but your father will still send you back until the end of Yen Kingdom. Don't hurt your father's heart. At this moment, Yen Dan's heart had already collapsed and he gritted his teeth, saying, then I drew my sword in front of your majesty. Why didn't your majesty kill me? Upon hearing this, Zulong's gaze once again lost focus, and eventually he slowly uttered a few words. Because you are my brother. P.S. Both of them used to work as protons in the state of Zhao, so they can be called fallen people from all over the world. They also had frequent interactions when they were young, so they can be said to be very good friends. In addition, Zulong has just begun to unify the 6 countries and has not yet faced so many assassinations, coupled with being a Yen Dan, so it is not as rigorous. Finally, the plot needs to be careful not to take it too seriously. If there are any similarities, it is purely a coincidence.